I'm Claire Walsh, 28 years old, and I could never have imagined in my wildest nightmares that my own parents would betray me in such a devastating way. It happened during what should have been an ordinary family dinner in Missoula, Montana, but their words hit me with the force of a physical blow. You are not part of this family anymore. Don't come back. My heart hammered violently in my chest as I sat there, staring at them in disbelief, my fork suspended in midair, unable to process what I'd just heard. My mother's eyes were ice cold, devoid of any warmth or recognition. My father's face remained completely expressionless, as if carved from stone. And my brother, Sean? He only smirked, clearly enjoying my shock and humiliation. Before I could even begin to react or find words to defend myself, they all stood up in unison, pointed decisively toward the door, and I stumbled out into the cold night air, my legs barely supporting me. The sharp click of the lock echoed behind me as the door shut firmly in my face. The key that I held in my trembling hand, the one I'd used countless times to enter what I'd always thought of as my home, suddenly became completely worthless. I pounded desperately on that door, my fists aching, shouting until my voice grew hoarse, but no one answered. No one even acknowledged that I was there. My entire world, everything I'd known and trusted, collapsed in that single devastating instant. I'd been cast out of my own home without warning, without mercy. There was no explanation offered, no chance to defend myself or understand what had gone wrong. Just their cruel, cold dismissal. I checked into a cheap, run-down hotel on the edge of town, my mind spinning wildly, desperately trying to piece together some logical reason why they had done this to me. Was it because I'd stubbornly refused to join the family business, the one thing they all cared about more than anything else? Or was it because I dared to chase my own dream of writing screenplays instead of following their predetermined path for my life? I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. Then, approximately 1 week later, my phone buzzed with an urgent email from their lawyer. "We have a problem. Call immediately." My stomach tightened into knots as I read those words. Just 1 week ago, these same people had coldly thrown me out of their home and explicitly declared that I was no longer part of their family. And now, suddenly, through their lawyer no less, they were actually begging for my help. I stared at those words glowing on my phone screen and let out a bitter, hollow smile. The irony was almost too much to bear. Have you ever faced betrayal from the people you trusted most in your life? The ones who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Share your story in the comments. I'd genuinely love to hear it because right now I feel completely alone in this nightmare. Growing up in Missoula, Montana meant living constantly under the heavy shadow of the Blair family name. It was a weight I carried every single day. My mom, Carol Blair, ran our family's event planning business with an iron fist, like a military general commanding her troops. Weddings, corporate galas, fundraisers, you name it, she organized it all. She'd built the business from absolutely nothing, starting from scratch years ago, and it had become her pride and joy, her entire identity, really. Every single dinner table conversation, without fail, revolved around the same exhausting topics: client lists, venue bookings, supplier negotiations, or profit margins. There was no escape from it. My dad, Richard Blair, handled all the finances and accounting for the business. He was always nodding along obediently to whatever Mom said, following her orders without question. His silence, his unwillingness to ever stand up or speak his own mind, was somehow louder and more telling than any words could have been. He'd become a shadow of a man, completely dominated by my mother's overpowering personality. Then there was my brother, Sean Blair, 5 years older than me. He was the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong in Mom's eyes. He thrived in the family business, absolutely soaking up Mom's constant praise and approval, like it was the oxygen he needed to breathe. He lived for her validation and worked tirelessly to maintain his position as her favorite. Me. I was the odd one out, the black sheep, the dreamer who would rather scribble screenplays and create fictional worlds than balance budgets or organize corporate events. I'd always loved writing stories, scripts, anything and everything that allowed me to escape from the suffocating reality of my family life. But to my family, especially to my mother, my passion was nothing more than a complete waste of time. "You need a real job, Claire," Mom would snap harshly, her eyes narrowing with disapproval and barely concealed anger whenever I mentioned pitching a script or pursuing my writing career. Sean would always smirk condescendingly, tossing out cruel lines like, "Keep dreaming, Claire, but don't expect a paycheck from your fantasies." Even Dad, who rarely spoke up about anything, would occasionally mutter dismissively, "The business is what keeps us afloat. That's what matters." Their harsh words stung deeply, cutting into my confidence and self-worth, but I stubbornly kept at it regardless, refusing to give up on my dreams completely. Last year, I'd secretly sneaked off to a small independent studio here in Missoula to pitch my very first screenplay. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Unfortunately, it flopped spectacularly, crashed and burned in the worst possible way. The rejection absolutely crushed me, left me feeling hollow and worthless. But somehow, their mocking laughter at the dinner table when they found out hurt even worse than the professional rejection itself. "Told you so," Sean had said smugly, pouring himself another generous glass of wine, clearly delighted by my failure. That moment is burned into my memory forever. The only person in my entire life who ever truly understood me, who saw my potential and believed in my dreams, was my grandmother, Florence Walsh. Grandma Florence wasn't like the rest of them at all. She was different, special, a beacon of light in my otherwise dark family dynamic. She'd sit with me for hours on her comfortable porch, her hands wrinkled and spotted with age, but still remarkably steady, patiently teaching me how to craft dialogue that could cut deep and resonate with audiences. "Your stories matter, Claire," she'd say, her voice warm and encouraging, her eyes bright with genuine belief in my abilities. We'd spend countless hours together breaking down classic old movies frame by frame, carefully analyzing every single line of dialogue, every unexpected plot twist, every character development. She'd jot detailed notes in the margins of my rough draft scripts, her cursive handwriting neat and always encouraging, always constructive. "Keep going," she'd whisper to me gently. "No matter what they say to discourage you, you have real talent." Those precious moments with her were my lifeline, the only time in my entire life when I felt truly seen and valued for who I actually was rather than who my family wanted me to be. Grandma Florence passed away 2 years ago, and her absence left a gaping hole in my life, an emptiness that nothing and no one could possibly fill. But the relentless pressure from Mom, Dad, and Sean never let up for even a moment. The business was everything to them. Our legacy, they constantly called it, as if it were some sacred trust passed down through generations. When I was just a kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old, I'd tag along reluctantly to their various events, carrying heavy tablecloths or helping set up uncomfortable metal chairs in hotel ballrooms and convention centers. But even back then, even at that young age, I'd always sneak away whenever possible to write quick scenes in my worn notebook, creating little stories to entertain myself. Mom caught me doing this once, and her face twisted with fury and disappointment. "You're not here to play, Claire. This is our future. You're wasting time on nonsense." I remember that moment vividly because I was only 12 years old, just a child, and her words made me feel worthless. By the time I hit my 20s, I'd moved out of the family home, determined to chase my dream in Missoula's tiny, struggling film scene. I was going to make it work somehow, prove them all wrong. But after the devastating studio rejection, after my screenplay was dismissed and my dreams were crushed, I had no choice but to move back home with my tail between my legs, defeated and humiliated. The looks on their faces when I returned said absolutely everything without a single word being spoken. I was a complete failure in their eyes, exactly what they'd always predicted I would be. Living back in that house was like walking on eggshells every single minute of every single day. The tension was unbearable. Every morning, every afternoon, every evening, Mom pushed me relentlessly to join the family business. "You could actually be great at this, Claire," she'd say, though her tone carried far more command than genuine encouragement. It wasn't a suggestion or an offer. It was an expectation, a demand. Sean would always chime in with his unwanted opinions, his voice dripping with condescension. "She'd just mess everything up, Mom. We should stick to what we know works. Keep her away from the important clients." Dad would just sit there silently sipping his morning coffee, deliberately avoiding making eye contact with me, refusing to take any side or offer any support whatsoever. I tried desperately to keep writing despite everything, locking myself away in my small bedroom for hours, typing frantically late into the night while the rest of the house slept. But their voices and their constant discussions about work seemed to echo endlessly through the thin walls. Client calls, event planning meetings, Sean's smug laughter celebrating another successful booking. I felt like a complete outsider in what was supposed to be my own home. My scripts, my creative work, my passion had become a shameful secret that I had to hide from everyone. Something to be embarrassed about rather than proud of. Grandma Florence's encouraging words and unwavering belief kept me going during those dark times. She'd left me her old vintage typewriter in her will, a heavy, clunky thing that I absolutely cherished more than anything else I owned. I'd run my fingers gently over its worn keys, remembering all her patient lessons and sage advice. "A good story needs heart, Claire. Real, genuine emotion. Don't ever let anyone take that away from you," she used to tell me. But having heart wasn't nearly enough when Mom's crushing expectations loomed over me constantly like a dark storm cloud ready to burst. She'd barge into my room without knocking, completely disregarding my privacy, tossing thick event proposals carelessly onto my cluttered desk. "Read these carefully. Learn something actually useful for once," she'd command. I'd nod obediently, but my mind was always elsewhere, completely lost in scenes and dialogue that I knew I'd probably never get the chance to finish properly. Sean's cruel jabs and pointed comments grew sharper and more frequent too. "Still writing your silly little movies," he'd say mockingly, leaning casually against my doorframe with that infuriating smirk on his face. "Grow up, Claire. Join the real world." I started seriously doubting myself and questioning everything. Maybe they were actually right about me. Maybe my dreams really were nothing more than childish fantasies that I needed to let go of. But every time I closed my eyes at night, exhausted and discouraged, I would see Grandma Florence's kind, weathered face clearly in my mind. I could hear her gentle, encouraging voice urging me to keep fighting, to never give up. She believed in me wholeheartedly when absolutely no one else did, when I was completely alone. And somehow, miraculously, that belief, that faith she'd had in my abilities, felt like the only thing still holding me together, preventing me from falling apart completely. Back in that house, living under their roof again, the pressure and tension only intensified and got progressively worse with each passing day. Mom had one single-minded goal that consumed her: get me into the family's event planning business, make me conform, crush my dreams once and for all. "Claire, this is your big chance to finally prove yourself to us," she announced one morning, shoving a thick stack of client proposals forcefully across the kitchen table toward me, expecting me to drop everything and study them immediately. The Blair Events Company was my mother's empire, her kingdom, and she fully expected me to fall in line without question or resistance. I'd sit through countless tedious meetings, mechanically jotting down endless details for elaborate wedding receptions or luxurious corporate retreats, but my mind was always drifting somewhere else entirely. It would wander to the screenplay I'd been carefully tweaking and refining for months, the one that represented everything I truly cared about. At night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I'd lock my bedroom door securely, making sure no one could interrupt me, and then I'd type furiously on my laptop, crafting intricate scenes about fictional characters who fought courageously for their freedom, for their right to choose their own paths in life. I'd send carefully crafted pitches to small independent studios scattered throughout Missoula, desperately hoping for that one crucial break, that single opportunity that would change everything. But every rejection email that appeared in my inbox felt like a physical punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. And inevitably, Mom's harsh voice would echo relentlessly in my head. "This isn't a game, Claire. You need to grow up and face reality." Sean was absolutely no better, perhaps even worse in some ways. He'd barge into my room without any warning or respect for my privacy, glancing dismissively at my laptop screen with obvious contempt. "Still playing screenwriter?" he'd taunt cruelly, his smirk sharp enough to cut through steel. "You're wasting everyone's time, especially Mom's." He thrived in the family business, effortlessly charming clients with his polished persona and constantly basking in Mom's abundant approval and praise. To him, my dreams and aspirations were nothing more than a pathetic joke, an irritating distraction from what he considered the all-important family legacy. Dad, as usual and as always, stayed completely quiet, his eyes perpetually fixed on his coffee mug during our increasingly tense family dinners. But his deliberate silence screamed agreement with Mom's relentless demands louder than any words could have. "Just try it, Claire," he'd mutter occasionally, barely looking up from whatever he was focused on. "The business is steady. Reliable. Steady." That single word felt like a heavy chain wrapped around my ankles, weighing me down, preventing me from flying. I kept writing despite everything, though. I'd stay up well past midnight, long after the house had gone silent, refining dialogue, polishing scenes, imagining my name prominently displayed on a movie poster in some theater somewhere. I'd actually landed a legitimate gig at a small independent studio in Missoula last spring, assisting on a modest, low-budget film production. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, certainly nothing glamorous, but it was genuinely my own achievement. It represented a real foot in the door of the industry I loved. I'd spend long, exhausting days on set, eagerly soaking up every single detail of the filmmaking process and tweaking my own scripts during whatever breaks I could find. Then, approximately 3 months ago, disaster struck. The studio suddenly lost its funding due to investor pullout. The entire project collapsed overnight like a house of cards, and along with it, so did my job and all my immediate prospects. I was absolutely devastated, crushed under the weight of failure. My meager savings drained rapidly, my fragile confidence completely shot to pieces. With nowhere else to go and no other viable options, I reluctantly packed my bags and moved back home, defeated and humiliated. The very moment I stepped through that familiar front door, carrying my belongings, Mom's overwhelming expectations hit me like a massive tidal wave, threatening to drown me. "You tried your little hobby," she said dismissively, her voice cold and utterly devoid of sympathy or understanding. "Now it's finally time to join us for real, to do what you should have been doing all along." She handed me a company laptop that was already loaded with complex event spreadsheets, client databases, and booking calendars. I wanted desperately to scream, to tell her forcefully that I wasn't giving up on my dreams, that this was just temporary. But I needed a roof over my head and food to eat, so I simply nodded reluctantly, swallowing my considerable pride and biting back all the words I really wanted to say. Sean didn't let it slide for even a moment. "Back already?" he'd say mockingly, leaning casually against the kitchen counter with that insufferable smirk plastered on his face. "Guess your big Hollywood dreams didn't quite pan out the way you imagined. Huh." His cruel words burned like acid, searing into my already wounded pride, but I absolutely refused to let him see me break down or show any weakness. Every single day became an exhausting battle, a constant struggle to maintain my sense of self. Mom would drag me forcibly to important client meetings, introducing me enthusiastically as the new planner, while I forced an artificial smile onto my face, my notebook full of script ideas and character sketches hidden carefully in my bag where no one could see them. I'd overhear Sean boasting obnoxiously about landing yet another big corporate event contract, his massive ego filling the entire room and sucking all the air out of it. Dad would nod along mechanically to everything, never questioning anything, never defending me or taking my side even once. At home, whenever I could manage it, I'd escape to the sanctuary of my room, pouring all my accumulated frustration, anger, and pain into my scripts. I wrote passionately about a strong woman breaking free from a controlling, suffocating family, her courage and determination growing stronger with every page I wrote. It felt like looking into a mirror reflecting my own life back at me, but the unbearable tension in the house kept building steadily, like pressure in a volcano ready to explode. Mom started aggressively scheduling me for back-to-back events, deliberately leaving absolutely no time for my writing or any personal pursuits. "You're not pulling your weight around here," she'd snap angrily when I missed a deadline or made a small mistake, her accusing eyes boring into me. Sean would eagerly pile on with his criticism, dropping snide remarks casually like, "Maybe if you actually focused on what matters, you'd actually contribute something valuable to this family." I'd bite my tongue hard to keep from responding, tasting blood, but inside I was screaming loudly, desperately wanting to fight back. I'd sneak furtive phone calls to a trusted friend who worked in the film industry, asking anxiously about new opportunities, potential openings, any chance at all. But the rejections just kept coming relentlessly, one after another, like waves crashing on a shore. My dreams felt further away than ever before, more impossible to reach, and the crushing weight of their constant disapproval and disappointment was slowly crushing me, grinding me down into nothing. One particularly difficult night, I sat alone at my desk, staring blankly at my latest script on the glowing screen. I'd written a powerful scene where the heroine finally stood up defiantly to her oppressive family, her voice strong, clear, and completely unshaken by their threats. I desperately wanted to be her, to have her courage and conviction, but I wasn't there yet. I wasn't ready. I closed my laptop slowly, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Something had to give. Something had to change, and soon. That fateful dinner changed absolutely everything in my life. I sat directly across from Mom and Dad at the polished dining table, with Sean smirking smugly from his usual seat. The air was thick and heavy with unbearable tension, the metallic clink of forks against plates the only sound breaking the oppressive silence until Mom finally broke it. "Claire, we need to have a serious talk about your future," she said firmly, her voice sharp as a knife and just as cutting. I knew immediately what was coming, could feel it in my bones. It would be another lengthy lecture about joining the family's event planning business permanently, giving up my foolish dreams once and for all. I'd heard variations of this speech 100 times before, maybe more, but tonight something was different inside me. Tonight I was completely done holding back, done biting my tongue and playing along. "I'm not giving up my screenwriting," I said clearly, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tight knot of anxiety in my stomach. "It's what I love. It's who I am." Mom's eyes narrowed dangerously, her face hardening into an expression I'd seen many times before. "Love doesn't pay the bills, Claire. This family built something real, something tangible and valuable. You're thoughtlessly throwing it all away for a childish fantasy that will never happen." I clenched my fists tightly under the table, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. "It's not a fantasy, Mom. I'm actually good at this. I've been pitching scripts to real studios, getting valuable feedback from industry professionals." Sean immediately cut me off with a harsh, mocking laugh that echoed through the room. "Feedback," he said sarcastically. "You mean rejections, right? Face it, Claire. You're simply not cut out for this. You don't have what it takes." His words sliced through me like razor blades, but I pushed back hard, refusing to back down this time. "At least I'm trying to do something I care about, Sean. You just blindly follow Mom's orders like an obedient puppet on strings." Dad, who'd been characteristically silent throughout this entire exchange, finally spoke up. "That's enough, Claire. You're embarrassing yourself and this entire family." His voice was low and controlled, but it hit me like a physical slap across the face. I turned to him desperately, searching his face for any sign of support or understanding. "Dad, you know I've been working incredibly hard at this. Why can't you just support me for once in my life?" He deliberately looked away, refusing to meet my pleading eyes, his jaw tight with tension. Mom abruptly stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor with a sound that made me flinch. "This is your home, Claire, but only if you're genuinely part of this family. If you deliberately choose this ridiculous nonsense over us, over everything we've built, then you're out. It's that simple." I froze completely, unable to process what I was hearing. "What are you saying?" My voice shook uncontrollably with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Mom's face transformed into cold, hard stone, completely devoid of any motherly warmth or affection. "You are not part of this family anymore. Get out, now." Sean smirked triumphantly, folding his arms across his chest in satisfaction. Dad just stared down at his plate, refusing to intervene or say anything in my defense. I stood up shakily, my legs trembling so badly I could barely support my own weight, and grabbed my bag with numb fingers. "You can't possibly mean that," I said weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. But Mom simply pointed firmly toward the door, her arm extended like an accusation. "Now," she repeated coldly, leaving no room for argument or negotiation. I stumbled outside into the night, the cold air hitting my face like a shock as I heard the lock click decisively behind me, sealing my fate. I banged desperately on the solid door with my fists, shouting hoarsely, "Mom! Dad! Please open the door! Please!" Nothing. Complete silence. My key, which I frantically pulled from my pocket, didn't work anymore in the lock. They'd already changed the locks, planned this, prepared for my exile. I'd been erased from my own home in an instant. I ended up at a cheap, dingy hotel several blocks down the street, my mind racing frantically, trying to process everything that had just happened, trying to understand how my entire life had fallen apart in a single evening. How could they possibly do this to me? How could my own family treat me this way? I tried calling Mom first, then Dad, then finally Sean, desperately hoping someone would answer and explain what was happening. No answer from any of them. My texts went completely unread, showing delivered but never opened. I sat alone on the stiff, uncomfortable hotel bed, scrolling anxiously through my bank app on my phone, trying desperately to figure out my next move, to understand how I was going to survive this nightmare. That's when I saw it, and my blood ran cold. My savings account, the one I'd shared with Sean specifically for emergencies, was completely empty. $1,000 gone without a trace. I called the bank immediately, my hand shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone steady. The funds were withdrawn yesterday, the clerk informed me in a professionally neutral tone. By Sean Blair. My brother. He'd taken everything I had, every penny I'd managed to save. I stared blankly at my phone screen, my chest tight and constricted with an overwhelming sense of betrayal that I'd never experienced before. Sean had always been petty and competitive with me, always trying to prove he was better, but this was a completely new low, even for him. I tried calling him again, my voice shaking as I left a voicemail message. "Why, Sean, that was my money. That was all I had left." No response came. Nothing. Complete silence. I thought about Grandma Florence, remembering how she'd always tell me to keep fighting no matter what obstacles I faced, to never give up on my dreams. But right now, sitting in this depressing hotel room, I felt like I'd lost absolutely everything that mattered. My home, my family, my savings, my sense of security. Everything. I curled up tightly on the bed, my laptop open to my latest script, which seemed to be the only thing I had left in this world. I wasn't ready to give up, I told myself firmly, but I honestly didn't know how to keep going, how to move forward from this devastation. Approximately 1 week later, my phone buzzed unexpectedly with an incoming message. I was still holed up in that same cheap Missoula hotel, My entire life packed into a single worn suitcase, my savings account still showing zero. The email was from someone named Robert Kane, identified as the trust's lawyer, and the subject line made me stop breathing for a moment. Urgent Florence Walsh Trust. My heart skipped several beats. Grandma Florence. What could this possibly be about? I opened the email with trembling fingers, scanning the formal words quickly. You are entitled to significant assets under a trust established by Florence Walsh. Please contact me immediately to discuss. Assets? A trust? I hadn't heard anything about any trust, ever. My hands shook uncontrollably as I dialed Robert's number, which was listed at the bottom of the email. Claire, he said when he answered, his voice calm but carrying a firm, professional tone. Your grandmother set up a comprehensive trust for you before she passed away 2 years ago. It specifically guarantees your legal right to stay in the family home and provides substantial funds for your screenwriting career. I nearly dropped the phone in shock. The family home? The same house where Mom and Dad had just cruelly locked me out of? And actual money to support my writing dreams? There's more, Robert added seriously. Florence left a detailed personal letter for you. I'll send it over immediately along with all the trust documents. I agreed quickly to meet him the very next day, my mind racing frantically with questions. Why hadn't anyone ever told me about this trust? Why was I only finding out now? The documents arrived at the hotel later that same day, delivered in a thick manila envelope containing dense legal jargon and a sealed letter written in Grandma Florence's familiar, elegant cursive handwriting. I tore it open carefully, my eyes already stinging with tears as I began reading her precious words. My dearest Claire, it began, and I could almost hear her warm voice speaking to me. I've always known your heart belongs to your stories, to your creative spirit. This trust is my way of protecting you from those who don't truly understand you. Your mother, your father, your brother. They'll try to control you, to force you into their mold. But you are stronger than their doubts and limitations. The house is rightfully yours to claim, and the funds are specifically for your dreams. Don't ever let them take that away from you. I clutched the letter tightly to my chest, tears streaming freely down my face, soaking the paper. Grandma Florence had somehow seen all of this coming. She'd predicted Mom's impossible demands, Dad's cowardly silence, Sean's cruel betrayal. She'd carefully planned ahead to shield me from all of it, to give me a way out, a path forward. The trust details, as Robert explained them to me, were absolutely staggering in their generosity. Florence had set aside more than enough money to cover all my living expenses comfortably and support my screenwriting ambitions for several years, maybe even longer. There was a specific clause ensuring I could legally stay in the family home no matter what Mom or Dad said or tried to do. Your parents were officially notified of the trust's existence when Florence passed away, Robert explained carefully over the phone during our next conversation. But they've deliberately ignored its terms completely. The illegal lockout triggered an automatic legal review of the situation. I gripped the letter even tighter in my hands. They knew. They'd known about this trust all along. And they still kicked me out anyway. They'd still tried to destroy me. I reread Florence's beautiful words slowly, her gentle voice echoing clearly in my head. You are stronger than their doubts, she'd written with such confidence. She'd written detailed memories about my childhood, describing how I'd sit contentedly on her lap, scribbling imaginative stories, while she smiled down at me with such love and pride. Your mother wanted you to fit her mold, she wrote, but I saw your fire, your unique spark. This trust is your freedom, Claire. Every single line felt like a lifeline, pulling me gradually out of the deep despair I'd been drowning in since that terrible dinner. But it also burned with righteous anger. Mom, Dad, and Sean had deliberately kept this crucial information from me. They'd locked me out of my own home, stolen my hard-earned savings, and tried to crush my spirit completely. How could they do something so unforgivably cruel? I called Robert again, my voice steadier now, stronger than before. What's the next step? What do we do now? He outlined a formal meeting to legally enforce the trust's terms, warning me carefully that it could get very messy. Your family might fight this aggressively, he said seriously. They've been managing the trust assets, and there are some concerning discrepancies in the financial records. Discrepancies? My stomach twisted into knots. Had they actually tampered with the trust? Had they stolen from it? I thought of Sean's smug, arrogant face, the missing $1,000 from my personal account. This wasn't just about the house or the money anymore. It was fundamentally about control, about them trying to dominate every aspect of my life. I spent the entire night carefully poring over the trust documents, meticulously highlighting important clauses, making detailed notes in the margins. Florence had thought of absolutely everything in her planning. Legal protections, funding mechanisms, specific timelines, even a generous provision for legal fees if the trust was challenged in court. I felt her incredible strength in every carefully chosen word, her unwavering belief in my abilities and my future. But doubt crept in too, dark and insidious. Confronting Mom, Dad, and Sean directly would mean tearing open old wounds that had never properly healed. Could I really do this? Did I have the strength? The meeting room felt exactly like a battlefield, tense and dangerous. I sat directly across from Mom, Dad, and Sean, studying their faces carefully. Their expressions showed a complex mix of defiance and barely concealed unease. Robert Kane, the trust's lawyer, stood professionally at the head of the long table, his briefcase open with papers neatly stacked and organized. My hands gripped Grandma Florence's letter tightly, its powerful words fueling my resolve and giving me courage. This was it. This was the crucial moment to take back what was rightfully mine, what Grandma Florence had intended for me. Robert cleared his throat formally, his voice steady and authoritative. We're here today to address the Florence Walsh Trust and its significant mismanagement. Mom's eyes narrowed dangerously into hostile slits. Mismanagement. That's completely absurd. We've managed everything perfectly. Sean leaned back casually in his chair, arms crossed defensively across his chest, his trademark smirk barely hiding his obvious nerves. Dad stared down at the polished table surface, silent as ever, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Robert didn't flinch at their hostility. The trust was established specifically to ensure Claire's right to the family home and provide funds for her screenwriting career, he said calmly, sliding an official document forward across the table. Yet $150,000 was withdrawn without Claire's knowledge or consent and used instead to upgrade Blair Events' company equipment and facilities. Sean scoffed dismissively. That's a complete lie. The company desperately needed those funds for expansion, but his voice wavered, noticeably lacking conviction. I locked eyes with him directly, my anger flaring hot and bright. You took my personal savings too, Sean. $1,000 gone. And now this. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, saying absolutely nothing in his defense. Robert continued professionally, presenting detailed bank records and financial statements. These specific transactions trace directly back to Carol and Sean Blair and were officially approved by Richard Blair. The trust documents explicitly prohibit any personal use of its funds for business purposes. Mom's face reddened noticeably with anger and embarrassment. We built that company from absolutely nothing, she said defensively, her voice rising. Claire doesn't deserve a single dime if she's not actively contributing to the family business. Her harsh words stung deeply, but I was absolutely done letting them hurt me anymore. Contributing. I snapped back, my voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. You locked me out of my own home, Mom. Grandma Florence specifically wanted me to have it. It was her wish, not yours to ignore. Dad finally spoke up, his voice characteristically low and controlled. We thought we were doing what's best for the family as a whole. I shook my head firmly, my resolve strengthening. No, Dad. You did what's best for yourselves. There's a difference. Robert methodically laid out more damning evidence across the table. Emails, detailed financial statements, concrete proof of the family's unauthorized spending on brand new office equipment, and extensive marketing campaigns for the company. Every single page represented another betrayal, another confirmation that they'd known about the trust all along and had deliberately ignored its terms. This is a clear violation of the trust agreement, Robert stated professionally. Claire is legally entitled to the house and the remaining funds, plus substantial damages for the misappropriated amount. Sean suddenly slammed his hand violently on the table, making everyone jump. You're not taking anything, Claire. You're a complete failure who will just waste it all on your stupid scripts. His aggressive outburst only strengthened my resolve further. I stood up slowly, my voice surprisingly firm and steady. I'm done with this family. I want the apartment in Missoula as the trust specifically allows. I'll take the funds Grandma Florence left for my writing, and then we're through. Finished. Mom gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. You can't just walk away from your family like this. But I held her gaze steadily, unflinching. You walked away first when you locked that door on me. Remember? Robert nodded approvingly, jotting down detailed notes in his legal pad. Claire's proposal aligns perfectly with the trust's stated terms and intentions. The apartment's deed can be legally transferred, and the funds will be released directly to her account. He turned deliberately to face Mom, Dad, and Sean. You'll also face a comprehensive audit for the $150,000. Full repayment may be required, along with penalties. Sean's trademark smirk vanished instantly from his face, and Mom's complexion went deathly pale. Dad just looked utterly defeated, his shoulders slumping, his hands folded tightly together on the table. I felt a confusing mix of triumph and deep pain coursing through me. Grandma Florence's trust was my lifeline, my salvation, but facing my family like this hurt far more than I had expected it would. You could have supported me, I said, my voice breaking slightly with emotion. Instead, you deliberately stole from me. Mom tried to interrupt, opening her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand firmly to stop her. No, I'm done listening to excuses and justifications. I'm taking what's rightfully mine and moving on with my life. Robert handed me an expensive-looking pen to sign the preliminary agreement, his expression calm but clearly approving of my decision. As I signed my name carefully on the dotted line, I thought of Grandma Florence's powerful words echoing in my mind. You are stronger than their doubts. She'd known they'd try to break me, to crush my spirit completely, but she'd given me the tools to fight back effectively. The apartment would represent my fresh start, a clean slate, a place to write freely without their constant judgment hanging over me. The trust funds would allow me to pitch my scripts to studios, maybe even produce a short film independently. I looked at Mom, Dad, and Sean one final time, studying their faces carefully. Their heavy silence said absolutely everything. They'd lost control over me. Walking out of that tense meeting room, I felt lighter than I had in years, though the weight of losing my family still lingered painfully in my chest. I didn't want their hollow apologies or their weak excuses. I wanted freedom, pure and simple. 2 weeks later, after what felt like an eternity, the papers were finally signed and notarized. Robert Kane called to confirm officially that the Florence Walsh Trust had finalized the transfer of a Missoula apartment directly to my name. Mom, Dad, and Sean had no choice whatsoever but to agree to the terms. Backed into a corner by the overwhelming legal weight of Grandma Florence's explicit wishes, their reluctant signatures on the agreement felt like a surrender, though I knew they'd fought bitterly until the very last possible moment. Robert's voice was steady and professional over the phone. The trust's funds covered the apartment purchase completely, and the remaining balance is now yours for your screenwriting career. The family's control over the trust is permanently terminated. I stood alone in the empty apartment for the first time, warm sunlight streaming through the large windows, keys clutched tightly in my hand. It was a small one-bedroom place, modest and unassuming. Nothing fancy or impressive, but it was genuinely mine. No more depressing hotel rooms, no more locked doors keeping me out. I set my laptop carefully on the kitchen counter, already imagining late nights, writing scripts without Mom's endless lectures or Sean's cruel sneers interrupting my thoughts. But the victory was undeniably bittersweet, tinged with sadness. I'd won the battle, but at the tremendous cost of my family. The Blair Events Company was rapidly crumbling under the devastating fallout. Robert had officially warned them about the upcoming audit for the $150,000 they'd illegally siphoned from the trust. News spread incredibly fast in a small city like Missoula. Long-term clients pulled out nervously, wary of the growing scandal and what it meant. A local newspaper ran a prominent story about the lawsuit, hinting strongly at financial misconduct and mismanagement. I didn't read past the headline. I didn't need to see the details. The company's hard-earned reputation was tanking rapidly, and with it went Mom's fierce pride and Sean's insufferable arrogance. Dad, as always, stayed out of everything, probably burying himself deep in paperwork to avoid dealing with the catastrophic mess. I blocked all their phone numbers that same week, cutting off the last connection. Mom tried texting once, a curt, cold message about sorting this out reasonably. I deleted it immediately without replying. Sean left an angry voicemail, his voice absolutely dripping with bitter resentment. "You think you're better than us, Claire? Good luck surviving on your own." I erased it without hesitation, my hands remarkably steady. Dad didn't reach out at all, not even once. That hurt the most somehow. His crushing silence was louder than any argument could have been. I didn't want their hollow apologies or their misdirected anger anymore. Grandma Florence had given me a way out, a path forward, and I was taking it without looking back. Settling into the apartment took considerable time and effort. I bought a sturdy second-hand desk from a thrift store, a cheap but functional lamp, and a few green plants to make the place feel alive and welcoming. Every single morning, I'd sit peacefully by the window sipping hot coffee, typing new scenes for a fresh script. It was about a woman methodically rebuilding her entire life after devastating betrayal, her inner strength growing steadily with every step forward. The words flowed easier now, unburdened by the crushing weight of family expectations and constant criticism. I sent carefully crafted pitches to small independent studios throughout Montana, my confidence slowly creeping back. A producer in Bozeman emailed back, genuinely interested in a short film concept I'd proposed. It wasn't Hollywood by any means, but it was definitely a promising start. Sometimes I'd find myself staring thoughtfully at Grandma Florence's letter, tucked carefully into a drawer for safekeeping. Her words remained my anchor, keeping me grounded. "You are stronger than their doubts." I'd trace the faded ink gently with my fingers, remembering her warm, encouraging smile, her absolute belief in my abilities. She'd known Mom would relentlessly try to mold me into something I wasn't, that Sean would systematically tear me down, that Dad would passively stand by and do nothing to help. She'd carefully built this safety net, and I was finally free to use it properly. But freedom inevitably came with its own shadows, its own complications. Late at night, when the apartment was completely quiet and still, I'd feel the deep ache of what I'd permanently lost. Not the family they'd actually become, cold and controlling, but the one I'd always hoped for deep in my heart. The one where Mom might have genuinely cheered enthusiastically for my scripts instead of dismissing them. Where Dad might have finally spoken up and defended me instead of remaining silent. Where Sean might have been a real brother, supportive and kind, instead of a bitter rival constantly competing with me. I deliberately pushed those painful thoughts aside, forcing myself to focus on the future instead of dwelling on what could never be. The trust's substantial funds gave me crucial breathing room to write freely, to chase my dreams without constantly scraping by and worrying about every dollar. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was enough. I had enough to survive, to create, to build something meaningful. Approximately 1 month into living in my new apartment, I got an unexpected call from Robert. The audit is moving forward as planned, he informed me, and the family is facing some pretty hefty fines and penalties. Blair Events might not survive this, honestly. I thanked him politely, keeping my voice calm and neutral. Their downfall wasn't my ultimate goal or what I'd wanted, but it was absolutely their consequence, the result of their own choices and actions. I hung up the phone, opened my laptop with renewed purpose, and started typing eagerly. The story wasn't finished yet, not my own personal story, and not the one glowing on my screen. But for the first time in my entire life, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd write my own ending, on my own terms. Months passed steadily, and my world gradually grew brighter and more hopeful. The Missoula apartment had truly become my sanctuary, my safe haven, its walls lined with colorful notes and index cards for my latest script project. I'd been pouring absolutely everything I had into my writing, every ounce of emotion and experience, and it finally paid off spectacularly when I received an exciting email from the Missoula Film Collective. My script, an emotionally powerful drama about a woman breaking free from her painful past, had been officially selected for their prestigious talent development program. I stared at the glowing screen in disbelief, my heart racing wildly. This was real, genuinely real. It was a legitimate chance to work with experienced professionals, refine my craft substantially, and maybe even see my story brought to life on screen. The program kicked off enthusiastically at a charming local theater where I met Levi Carter, a talented young director with a remarkably sharp eye for character development, and Tara Nguyen, a smart producer with an impressive knack for spotting raw potential in emerging writers. "Your script's got real heart," Levi told me earnestly over coffee after our very first intensive workshop. "It's raw and unpolished, but it's genuinely honest. That matters more than anything." Tara nodded enthusiastically, her eyes bright with excitement. "We desperately need more authentic voices like yours, Claire. Keep pushing forward. Don't stop now." Their encouraging words felt like a lifeline, pulling me gently into a supportive community that actually valued my work and saw my potential. We started meeting regularly each week, swapping creative ideas freely, critiquing drafts constructively, and planning ambitious projects together. A few weeks later, the program's director called me into her office unexpectedly. "Claire, we're inviting you to pitch your script to a panel of established producers at the Northwest Film Forum," she announced. My stomach flipped nervously. A pitch to real, professional producers who could actually make things happen. I spent entire days preparing meticulously, rehearsing repeatedly in front of my bathroom mirror, channeling Grandma Florence's unwavering belief in my abilities. "You are enough," her letter reminded me constantly, still framed prominently on my desk where I could see it every day. The day of the pitch finally arrived, and I stood nervously in a small conference room in Seattle, my voice surprisingly steady as I shared my story passionately with the panel. The producers leaned forward attentively, asking thoughtful questions, taking detailed notes. One of them, an older woman with stylish, sharp glasses, smiled warmly at me. "This could be something really special," she said genuinely. "Let's definitely talk about next steps soon." I walked out of that building feeling like I could actually fly, weightless and free. Back in Missoula, Levi and Tara quickly became my anchors, my support system. Levi would enthusiastically drag me to late-night diners, sketching creative shot lists on napkins and passionately debating character arcs until early morning. Tara helped me navigate the complicated business side of filmmaking, connecting me with talented local filmmakers and patiently teaching me how to properly budget a short film production. We'd spend entire weekends in my cozy apartment brainstorming over takeout food, laughing until our sides hurt from joy. They weren't just colleagues or professional contacts. They were my chosen family, the kind I'd never truly had with Mom, Dad, or Sean. With them, I didn't have to constantly prove myself or justify my existence. They simply saw me, the real me, not my past failures or disappointments. Sometimes, I'd catch myself thinking about my old family, wondering what had become of them. A news article mentioned that Blair Events Company was losing another major client, their once solid reputation still reeling badly from the ongoing lawsuit and scandal. I felt a brief pang of something, wondering if Mom ever regretted her harsh words, or if Dad ever wished he'd spoken up and defended me. Sean's social media presence had gone eerily quiet, his usual bravado and arrogance replaced by complete silence. But I didn't reach out to any of them. I'd made my choice deliberately and they'd made theirs. Freedom meant letting go of what was, and I was slowly learning to embrace it fully. The talent development program consistently pushed me to grow as a writer and as a person. I rewrote my script extensively, tightening dialogue, deepening characters, adding layers of meaning. Levi generously offered to direct a short version of the script, and Tara successfully secured a small grant to fund the production. We shot the film in Missoula using local actors and beautiful locations by the river. Watching my words come to life on set, seeing actors speak lines I'd written, I felt an overwhelming surge of pride. This was exactly what I'd fought for, what I'd sacrificed everything for, a chance to tell stories that genuinely mattered. The short film got accepted to a regional festival, and the three of us celebrated enthusiastically with cheap wine in my apartment, toasting to new beginnings and future possibilities. Through it all, through every challenge and triumph, I kept coming back to Grandma Florence's most important lesson. My value didn't come from others' approval or validation. It came from within, from deep inside myself, from the stories I told, the work I did, the people I chose to keep close. Levi and Tara reminded me of that fundamental truth every single day, their unwavering support, a steady foundation I could build on. I wasn't running desperately from my past anymore, always looking over my shoulder. I was actively building something new, something better, something entirely my own. Standing peacefully on my apartment balcony one evening, watching the gorgeous sunset over the Clark Fork River, I felt genuinely whole and complete for the first time. My story wasn't finished yet, far from it, but for the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty that I was writing it entirely on my own terms, free from anyone else's expectations or limitations.